underway now that you're both here, if that sounds good to you. Jolene, what's your business?
I work for Northeast Bank.
Oh, well, welcome.
Another bank?
So I was sharing my screen a moment ago, and if you wandered into the room and was trying to understand why I was sharing information about salons with you, I'm going to pull that back up if that seems helpful. This information is the checklist for the cosmetology and barbering establishments. And one of the reasons that I've shared this with each of the participants in the groups that I've had today is because this is maybe the most detailed list about what folks who are interacting with customers need to wear, what steps they need to do in scheduling and in holding appointments with customers, which is different than kind of boutique retail, but naming that feels pretty important. There's also a lot of guidance in here around managing waiting rooms. So not having waiting rooms, making sure any items in waiting rooms are removed. So no magazines, no things that are touchable and would invite somebody to touch. But I was also noting these questions here, which could be questions that your staff are required to ask of anyone who's scheduling an appointment or spending any time kind of close quarters with any of your employees. So I wanted to pull these up. There is not guidance specifically on retail yet, and I'm happy to kind of walk through some of the links that I shared with you guys. But before we just dive in, I think it's really helpful to know, how are you entering this conversation? What big picture questions might you have? I'm happy to overview some of the guidance that I think is most important and that you might be paying attention to, noting that there's nothing specific for you yet. But I would just love to hear kind of like where your baseline of information is and what you hope to get out of this session.
So this is Patricia, and I mean, I'll just tell you that I am not, I have not yet been on the reopening, sort of our reopening work group. That formally actually starts tomorrow. We start our meeting. So far, the people that have been involved in working on the reopening has been our facilities team, and then sort of also the person who's sort of overseeing the whole project. So I know, for example, that like our facilities team has been sourcing and installing barriers and the the plexiglass shields and all of that, so that when we can have clients in, that that we have the appropriate barriers in place, and doing the floor markings and the 6 feet but I'm not intimately aware of the details. My charge today was attend this and take really good notes and bring this information back to the committee.
Well, that's fantastic. I would say, in helping you meet your commitment to your committee, sharing this information with them, I think would be really helpful. I'm happy to kind of walk through a couple of these that you might find the most useful. The reopening of Maine's economy, you're the only one left on the call now, so I'm going to be pretty specific to the banking industry if that seems helpful. Yeah, so this right here is this link. And so this is telling you what stages open where. And I think for you, the most important thing about this is one, your actual change to operations, assuming that your banks open up their lobby and their kind of retail portion of activity June 2nd. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's something that's specific. Given these bullet points, there's some assumptions that you can make that a checklist will be developed and shared with some specific guidance for retail. Given the way DECD has been talking about retail, I don't know that they'll distinguish it from the financial industry. And part of what we're noting is some of the, so this is true for lodging establishments, for example. Lodging establishments have been able to maintain operations, but under some very strict specifications of who they can serve and how they can serve them, and have not gotten the checklist or level of guidance that these businesses and industries that are reopening are getting. And so one of the things that I would note for you that you should be paying attention to, and that I'm more than happy to advocate for on your behalf is the way in which, because financial institutions have been kind of open all along, that you might not get the level of guidance that reflects the reality of the financial institution and how that's different from like retail boutiques and other type of retail establishments.
Mhm.
And so you might want that, quite frankly. You also might not. So if that's something that you're looking for, let me know. But I think the other thing that's really useful for you as a financial institution is to recognize kind of the uptick in activity that you might get from these other sectors that are reopening at which stage, and which of your members might be having prolonged financial hardship because they're opening at one of the later stages. That's maybe two of the other takeaways that I would point at for this usefulness. Is that helpful?
Yes, and that's very true. You know, we definitely know which of our industries, because our bank's model really is focused at smaller and micro businesses.
Yeah.
So we know very well, you know, that our dentists are closed and that so we have an eye on when we think that they'll be reopening.
Well, and I think one of the things that was frustrating, and I was just reading this article today, that dentists were theoretically allowed to open May 1st. And then some recent guidance came out about them opening, but only still serving emergency cases, which they were allowed to do all along. And so there's still some confusion throughout the dental practices around whether they can be open now for regular preventative care or not, for what that's worth. You can see kind of these further extension of personal services that are open in stage 3. Mm-hmm. I will note that when we were, so I've been on probably 3 or 4 calls with the DECD commissioner weekly, and through different avenues and for different reasons, but always around this plan. And one of the things that she noted pretty clearly is that there's no assumption that stage 4 is like September or October, mm-hmm. but that stage 4 is really reflective of kind of a vaccine or a cure, something really significant that shifts the environments that we're working in and how we can control the health aspects better. So I would just note that this stage 4 is a much longer term, kind of 12 to 24 month time frame. The way the administration is thinking about it. Some of the other things that I would note for you is there's the general checklist and the checklist and badging. And the general checklist looks like this and is really the specifications around who is at risk, what being at risk looks like, gives you some instructions on what to do if you're sick or if your employees are sick, offers some very, very summary guidance on how to clean or disinfect, and some information on electronics, which is absolutely relatable to you, but is not really helpful. It doesn't reveal too much. Have you seen the badging? Do you want me to show you that?
I know a very surface amount about it. I haven't dove into it at all. I know that there's like an online portal that you go in and basically self-affirm what you're doing.
Yep. So this is what that page looks like. This is where the general checklist is. As each different phase gets added, this is where they're linking their different guidances. And I would note, as you can see, that they're saying religious services can open, but they're not actually offering guidance about what that looks like. And the difference in detail with these outdoor rec lists versus the barbershop list, very different, very, very different. I wouldn't say that they're at odds with each other in any way, but different level of specificity and guidance and information. You can fill out this short online form. You've been open all along. It's just that you're opening up your lottie. So I don't know that you would need to fill that out. And hopefully they'll add more categories of businesses as June 1st and then the next phase approaches. But you can simply, when you click this, you're literally just downloading something you can print. And it is up to you, but it is not required for you to post these in your businesses. So
Oh, I
that's,
thought it was required. Okay.
yeah, it's not required. And they recognize that that's been the message that's gotten out there. What they found was a lot of essential businesses were taking a long form letter that declared them as essential and posting them in their windows.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to make something that was very recognizable and very easy for businesses. It's not a requirement. They were just trying to standardize it and make it more simple for businesses. And I think some of the messaging around that really got a little bit twisted in a way that they didn't expect or didn't think that was going to come back at them. But that is entirely your choice, just so you know. I would say, I mean, the OSHA guideline is lengthy and not super helpful. There's actually been some criticism about OSHA not offering enough clarity. And you could fill out the request for consideration to open, but you would have no need to because you technically are. I would say Androscoggin Bank in specific, as well as the financial sector, has done a good job kind of switching to e-commerce opportunities and integrating technology solutions. I would note this customer care piece might be helpful for you. This is and it's a pretty detailed, it covers a whole bunch of different aspects of caring for customers, whether it's inbound or outbound or communications to customers. So if you've got folks on your reopening team that are focusing on operations and physical components, and then you've got folks that are focusing on, customer messaging or communications,
yeah,
both might find this link really useful, for what that's worth. I think one of the things that you and your team should be paying attention to, and that we're paying attention to, is, and you've seen a lot of this, I'm sure, but the PPE that you need to provide your employees or require your employees to wear, and the PPE that you need to make available and or require your clients to wear. And those, again, I would tell you to go to the salon checklist. And I know that was an odd thing to include. Well, you don't need the golf one. Sorry. This protective gear that's required was a pretty extensive list, specifying masks and not face coverings for employees. I can't imagine that your staff would need face shields and you're putting up plexiglass to protect your employees anyway, but the amount of personal protective equipment and the way in which you need to change it regularly is pretty significant and could have a hard cost associated with it. What I'm hearing from businesses most consistently is they're concerned with their ability to actually acquire that, let alone the cost of it. There is still a shortage for a lot of these materials and items on the market in general. And so that's one of the things that I would, that's a new cost and a new ordering item and a new purchase order agreement maybe that needs to be created as a way of being open safely, that we're not used to and that we wouldn't be thinking of if we weren't kind of prompted to think about it. One of the things that we're paying attention to for some of our smaller businesses is looking at the creation of supply chain relationships that allows us to purchase in bulk so that our smaller members can be more competitive in their pricing for some of these kind of disposable masks, potentially gloves. A lot of folks are having a hard time getting hand sanitizer and disinfectant. All four are required at a level that you would never use before.
And so once we open to the public, that mask requirement is going to be in place for employees as well as clients, looks like.
I would, yeah, not only that, but as of today, any person in Maine going indoors is supposed to be wearing a mask, unless it's a closed office environment where physical distance is appropriate and able to be achieved for everybody. That's already a requirement. And we're seeing quite frankly, and you guys do a great job in your human resource department, training your staff and supporting your staff. We're absolutely seeing some members of the public, you know, verbally push back or degrade folks who are asking them to wear a mask. And so, I mean, I think making sure our employees know how to handle that is a really important thing to be thinking about as well. You know, what happens if a member of the public comes in and says, I don't want to wear a mask, or I'm not going to wear a mask. And there is some legitimacy to the fact that, you know, certain folks who have medical conditions that don't enable them to wear a mask, where wearing a mask for them is specifically unhealthy, cannot be required to, and nor can your staff be expected to somehow distinguish those folks from folks who don't have a medical reason to not wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody could look at you and say, I'm not going to wear one because I have a medical condition, and your staff can't ask them about their medical conditions, nor require them to wear a mask. And so I think that's one of the areas, you know, two areas that we're seeing a lot of questions are around liability and around insurance. And you know, within that liability area is this question around what level of requirement is on you and your staff to enforce any of these guidelines. And I think that's a challenging area to navigate because there's not a lot of clarity currently as it relates to those. I think the thing that I'm hoping for and would love to hear from you, and I get that you're working with a group tomorrow, and so you might not have this today, but what are the areas, given what you have seen or what you will be looking at around the stages of reopening, what are the areas that you hold the most questions around? Where do you feel like there's more clarity needed for you to be able to follow those guidelines or to understand the guidelines, follow them? Because we're compiling some of those questions right now and trying to get that feedback from DECD. I've got a pretty good contact in the small business department at the Department of Economic and Community Development, and have gotten pretty quick responses. And so I'm compiling the questions that are coming from each of you today. You're my third of these conversations to figure out where we can get that information to you, where we can get that clarity, and when we can advocate for better information or better options on behalf of our members. And so if there's anything you would like me to bring to that list or to get answered for you, happy to hear any questions that you may have.
And you know what I'd really love to do is tomorrow, actually, I'm signed up to go to the office environment.
Yeah, I saw that.
Wow. And then, so I'm going to be, when that gets over, that's scheduled from like 1:30 to 2:30 maybe, or 1 to 2. And that is actually going to be overlapping with our internal reopening team meeting. So I'll be walking out of that conversation with you and directly into our reopening committee meeting. And what I'll do is take questions from there and email them to you. So if we identify things that we think that we'd like to have more clarity around, I'd be thrilled to route those through you.
I would be more than happy to take them. And I'm happy to name some of the other questions that are coming up on our list in case that informs your discussion with your colleagues too. Sure. If that'd be helpful. Let me find that. Sorry, I've got 7 pages open, different ones, trying to figure it out, keeping them all aligned. Some of the questions, and I don't know that this would impact you. I don't know that it wouldn't either, I guess, to be clear, is the limits on group sizes of 50 or more. I mean, how many? You have a large employee base. Do you ever do events that are 50 or more people?
Not now.
Right.
Tomorrow is actually our annual employee appreciation event and annual awards, and we're doing it virtually.
Yeah.
And we've suspended in-person training. So for right now, we're not in a place where we're getting that many people together now.
Well, I think some of the questions that we've heard are, you know, when is that different than, when does that 50 look different with your staff counted or not? If you had a staff meeting and you're not open to the public, are you not able to have more than 50 people there, get close to 50 people there? That's one of the ones that we've seen be a question that I think a lot of folks are holding. Insurance, you know, is there insurance that protects you against something if there's a change in the distancing interventions that are required for organizations, businesses, community? That's a question that I think people are asking, and that a forward-looking business might be thinking about as well. Is what does that look like to have insurance that protects you against pandemic issues? The other thing that I would name, and I'm sure Michelle is already thinking about this, but there's the liability component from an employer perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, you know, a number of industry heads at a national level and business leaders at a national level are really lobbying for some employer protections around employees coming back to work and what happens if they get sick, and can employer be liable for kind of the normal course of day, an employee getting sick or even dying. And that is, it's not clear where that falls in the workman's comp world right now. And that's a very evolving place of law, litigation, and guidance. And so I think that's something to be maintaining kind of a beat on as the next couple of months come through and we call employees back. I would say, and you'll hear me speak to this tomorrow on the office environment one specifically, but you know, you can open your doors up to full office operations June 2nd, but you can't really require the same class of individuals that are being asked to remain at home or take extra precautions back to work. So your employees that are 65 and older, your employees that have some specific health concerns, and how do you ask your employees to self-identify that they fall into those at-risk categories is also a gray area. But we here are counting on some of our at-risk employees working remotely for further notice, months potentially. And I think that's a significant shift to how organizations and businesses are operating. Things to pay attention to, I suppose, Patricia.
We did that kind of in the beginning side of it, you know, just as everything was starting, we invited people to self-identify high risk, and they didn't need to be more specific. And we initially, when we initially were phasing into pushing everyone into remote work, you know, those are the people we prioritized. Although everything went real fast, so sometimes it only meant a day or two sooner than everybody else. But so we sort of already started doing that.
Yeah, well, that's great. I think knowing that whoever was in those early identified lists will also be your last to come back and might not be coming back even June 2nd, is I think one of the expectations that employers should probably be holding for a while. Yeah. Any other questions? I know that you'll ask me some tomorrow and follow up, which I absolutely welcome, and you have my email now.
And I'm sorry that I didn't
You're fine.
prepare more for you for this one. I was meant to be a sponge today.
No, you didn't have anything that you needed to prepare. It's really a feedback session where I can share some of what resources are known, and that's just a different list depending on which of these sessions I'm holding, because there's just some areas that there is very little information out there already. I've been paying attention to other states' plans, chambers across the US. I'm looking at industry information as well as information from other nations about how they're attempting opening and what some of what's coming up there. And so those are some of the links that I shared with you, and you'll be getting another email with kind of office environment specific links, which you can also share with your colleagues. and trying to get those information that's out either on our blogs at laadapts.com or in our weekly newsletters. But I would say it's evolving, and it continues to evolve, and it evolves rapidly. You know, we're being required to wear masks when 2 months ago it was requested that we don't wear masks.
Right.
That's kind of the whiplash that most of us who are trying to track the information and share it with folks are going through. And so it's okay if you don't have a clear list of questions yet, and it is completely appropriate for you to reach out to me as those questions arise. You don't have to wait until you get a certain number. Just bring them as you get them. That's what I'm here for.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes, I will. And I'm sure that after that meeting tomorrow, I'll have some more thoughts to share.
Great. I absolutely welcome it. And I mean, I think some of it is, you guys handle cash.
Yes.
You know, it's a very
Dirty. Yep.
Yeah, well, and you know, limiting cash exchange is at the heart of the guidances checklists that have already been created. And you know, you can't really do that. Financial institution can't say no, keep your cash at home, and we'll put it into your account, and you just hold on to the collateral. It doesn't work that way with cash. Right.
Especially with some of our more vulnerable populations, you know. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Who also need services. So how do we navigate that when hand sanitizer is in a shortage, right?
Right.
Yep. That's what we're paying attention to as well. Don't hesitate with questions that you have for me, and I'll look to see. I'm sure that you guys are following along, but McKinsey and Company has some pretty robust information for the financial industry as it navigates the pandemic, and that's one of the places that I've been getting some good information from.
You know, I think it was we got quite a lot of really good stuff from, I think it was the American Bankers Association, some very specific industry guidance. So yeah, we're just kind of taking everything we can find from every direction to kind of put it all in the pot and see what's the right thing to do.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
All right.
I hope your session goes well tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to ask any questions that you might have in follow-up. I'll try to get the office email out to you before the end of today so that you can share it with any of your colleagues that you'll be in that meeting with in case there's anything you want to bring forward.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will be in touch with you soon.
I appreciate it. Tell your team I say hello.
I will. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.